pleased that Mrs. Marsland came up with that article, two decades of euthanasia in the Netherlands, what have we learned? Because that puts to rest the whole story about the slippery slope. And please, if you can be bothered, please read the article, and it might even shine some light on your convictions, or how do I say it? Thank you very much, Mrs. Marsland, for bringing that up. I have no questions.
No. Okay, would anyone like to respond to that? I know it wasn't a question, but no, you're fine. Okay. Somebody else. Yes.
Can I ask
do you want to stand the mic for a moment? Sorry, we want it on the table.
May I ask the speaker on behalf of Hope if he could repeat some of his facts about disabled and youth in Netherlands and Belgium, because to my knowledge they were inaccurate. He was on so quickly that I wouldn't like to challenge him without hearing again what he said, please.
Thank you. I was going rather quickly, wasn't I? Euthanasia has been extended under the Groningen Protocol in hospitals to newborn disabled infants. Young people can, I think it's over the age of 16, refer to be euthanasia. I think if they're under 18, they must have a conversation with the parents also. And that was in Holland, by the way, not in Belgium.
It wasn't that. I do know that that is an actual fact. They can do that. They are people who make their own minds up, and with consultation with their parents, they can choose euthanasia. It was something to do with youth and disabled that I wanted to challenge, but I'm not sure what you said.
I believe that was my only reference, but to save time, I'd be happy to talk to you afterwards, rather than go back through my paper and try and find it.
You've done all of that, is that right? Can we ever talk to you afterwards? Just to get the statistics right. We will encourage you to use the mics because then you get recorded. Yes.
Just a question for you, Jan. Just in light of what was said about prioritising individual rights and the choice and control and minimising suffering, I'm just wondering how that extends to, and it's sort of come up indirectly, but I'm wondering how it extends to, say, teen cancer or even teen suicide or middle-aged or any age suicide where individuals are suffering so much, whether that's physically or emotionally, that they wish to exercise what some people would call a right to end their life. And I noticed in your vision it talks about the chronically ill being able to choose to die among the elderly and the terminally ill. I'm just wondering where and how you draw that line.
Thank you. Yes, it's a hairy one. It's a very hairy one. The question relating to, I think perhaps one of the questions which you posed there was, what is the difference between what we term ordinary suicide and what we are terming end-of-life choice? Is that one of the questions that you wanted to know? We talked about people who were committing suicide at an age. But this is an interesting one. I've actually changed my stance on what is the difference between suicide, which people often say, or used to say when the balance of their mind is disturbed, and what we are talking about end-of-life choice. I think the basic difference there is that in suicide, the individual is not facing death. They choose death. You see the difference? They are not at the end of their life, they do not have a terminal condition. I agree that quite often they may be desperately depressed, and that, as everybody knows, sometimes suicide is a call for help rather than an actual wish to end life. But the basic difference there is that what we are looking at is people who are at the end of their life and wish to make a decision as to how and when they die, rather than it just happening naturally. As nature has no sense at all of compassion. Nature's only interest is to continue the species, keep things going. There is no compassion in nature at all. The medical profession have compassion. The medical profession have reached... There's a guy, and I'll try not to be too long here. There's a guy in the UK who had a major stroke when he was on holiday in Greece. He now can only move his eyes. He is pleading to die, and he regrets that he actually called for medical assistance, because if he had not, he would have died as nature intended. But he called for help, and the medical profession have managed to keep him alive. But it's no life to Nick. He wants to die.
Thanks, Janet. Christian here.
Thank you for all of your great talks. I also work in palliative care, and I guess have been approached a few times by patients who have asked for euthanasia. And often I find that a few weeks down the track they've changed their mind, so I agree with Anne's talk there. But this is a question to Janet, is that often these patients actually have the means for suicide at home by taking medications. A patient only a couple of weeks ago had so much methadone in her house. If she had wanted to, she could have ended it. So I guess my question is, how would we safeguard it that, you know, patients have actually decided and that there isn't any other things that we can do to change their mind? For her, it was a fear of dying, and once we got through that and talked through what would happen over the coming weeks, she actually didn't want to take her own life. So how can we, you know, judge between someone who wants euthanasia and someone who actually has the means to really do it? Yes.
Janet?
Yes, it's a well-known fact. Very often this happened frequently in Oregon and happened in other countries, that when somebody who is in a desperate state, particularly if their natural death is not quite so close, to have the knowledge that they can go when they want to go very often makes them live longer, because they have the opportunity if things get totally on top. So I think the question that you were saying, and this has certainly happened in Oregon, that somebody has, through their legal system, been given the dose, the lethal medicine to take, which they take home with them, and then they take it home. And it sits on the shelf, and they don't take it. They may not take it for months, they may not take it at all, they may die naturally. But it is the hope, and there again, the guy I talked about, Nick, said, just the knowledge that I can go if I want to, rather than putting up with what I have to.
He's not quite there.
Sorry.
Oh, I thought you were doing supplementary.
No, sorry, it was more that, because I agree with obviously those cases in Oregon where they were given the dose and they could take it when they wanted to, but my point is that in New Zealand at the moment it's illegal, but a lot of patients would actually have enough medication in their house to end their life if they wanted to, if they misused that medication, not in the way that we teach them to, but if they did. Now those patients that have gone to their doctor and asked for euthanasia now, and have the means to do it themselves, although it's illegal and we don't encourage that, how can you safeguard that you're actually going to euthanize the person who is requesting it and is truly wanting to end their life, rather than those that are saying, I want to end my life, but through counselling and changing their pain relief, making them more comfortable, etc., we could change them, you know. Sorry, it's quite ready, but...
Is your question really that if someone has the means to take their own life at home, it's a little bit easy to avoid the safeguards, and that our system really doesn't quite catch them in time? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I guess it is that a lot of people request for euthanasia,
Yes.
you know, but a couple of weeks down the track they change their mind. So how are we going to make sure that they're not dead?
If they've got the means at home.
Correct, yeah.
Okay. Would anybody like to respond to that particularly?
The second bill, I think the time was 2 days. I'm not absolutely certain because there have been several drafts of the going through. I think we have extended that. I think it's now 7 days. So that, remembering that once a patient has said they wish to access the legal means of dying, they have to talk to their doctor. Their doctor has to agree that the situation in which they are in is such that it would fit the law with all various parameters. This request then has to go to a second doctor who has to agree that the conditions have been met. The act can then be made that the patient can sign to say that this is what they want, and there is a 7-day period of grace where they can say, no, I don't want it, and right up to the time of being given the dose, the patient can say no. We are not forcing euthanasia. It will be voluntary. Now, I hear what you are saying, that the state of mind of people in this terminal state can vary tremendously. One of the arguments that's been said is that people are being euthanized when all they've got is depression. Well, as one of the journals I read recently, I can't remember which one, said, who, facing a terminal condition and intolerable suffering, is not depressed?
Just, I'm sorry to stretch this out, but I don't think we've got to talk about your question. I think you're more worried about the business of stockpiling drugs at home. That was one of your concerns, wasn't it?
No, my thing is that there are lots of patients out there who are at the terminal phase of their life who have enough drugs at home that if they wanted to,
Yes.
they could take them and end their life.
Yes.
So my point is that if they came to me as a doctor and said, I want euthanasia, how can I know that they actually, how can I say this? So my question is that how come it has to be a doctor that can do that when they've already got their own means? If it truly was that the patient really wanted to end their life, how come they have just taken all those drugs and used it?
Is the problem to do with the stockpiling though? If there was a system to prevent that, would that ease that situation?
No, my point is that I think people will ask for euthanasia, but ask it because they're at a crisis point, not because they actually want euthanasia.
Right.
So if they truly wanted to end their own life, they've got the means to do that.
Right. Okay. Yes.
I don't have a question. I want to ease the discussion. Is
Yeah.
that possible?
You want to say something? Where you go?
I think that the recent case that's had so much publicity of Sean Davison and his mother, Pat Davison, is really quite instructive, because we understand from Sean came after, after he came out of prison, he came and spoke at one of our meetings, and he was asked why his mother, who was after all the doctor, didn't take the medication that she had in the house. She had enough morphine in the house to kill her. And so he was asked, why didn't she take it? And the explanation was that, and I think this would apply to quite a lot of patients who have what the doctor has just described as, they've collected up the drugs and they've got quite a lot in the house. People don't know whether for sure it will kill them when they actually really want to be dead. And so they're afraid to take the drugs because they might be sick and vomit and all that, and then they've just been a terrible mess for somebody else to clean up. And so I think there's quite a lot of explanation for why people don't use drugs that might kill them. Whereas if we could get it legal so that people got a legal dose of a drug as they do it in Oregon, then you can take it and be sure. You can have your party with your friends, you can have a drink of champagne, you can do whatever you want to do to celebrate the end of your life, but you're quite sure when you take the drug that you will actually die. Now obviously you've got to have lots of safeguards, and they do have safeguards in Oregon. And as Janet's pointed out, lots of people have the drug and never take it. They actually die and it's still in the cupboard. So it isn't, I think it's the business of having the right medication is actually really important.
Can I ask you, is there anything in law that makes anybody responsible if a patient is able to accumulate large quantities of drugs at home? Is there any way we can stop that or monitor it?
Sure, to be honest, I think there's probably people here with more experience than me, sort of probably with their answer to that. I mean, obviously, in terms of the drugs are illegal drugs, not allowed them. The drugs are legal drugs.
I'm sorry, I don't hear that answer.
Can you use the microphone?
Yeah, what I was going to say is, I think there's probably people here, doctors, who probably have a better, could answer that in a more specific way than I can, other than just saying, obviously, in New Zealand we have legal drugs, we have illegal drugs, we have classification of drugs, so we depend on the nature of those drugs and whether drugs are freely available, whether drugs that needed to be prescribed, whether drugs that were illegal. But, you know, I'm more than happy to leave that to a doctor. It's not my specialty area.
Okay. Anne, did you have any comments on this one? Or?
Just to say, it's an awful lot of people have a little chemist shop in their homes, and it costs the health system enormous amounts, and lots of people couldn't do themselves in.
Right. Okay. Question at the back, yes. Well, I'll fix you wait for the microphone, mate. Back there. Sorry about the microphone, people, but we are recording as we go.
Can I just do a quick
Yes, where you go?
previous one? I am prescribed regularly a drug which, if I care to keep it and put up with the symptoms for which it's prescribed me, it's prescribed me every month, and if I was to keep 5 or 6 months and put up with the symptoms of pain, and I was to take more, I would have probably a 95% chance. There's always, as Pat has said, there's always a slight chance that you might not be able to do it.
It seems to me that in the prescribing of drugs, there's no obligation to make sure the patient takes them on a regular basis.
I wonder, Jan, if I could put it to you, that it's a lot of nonsense going on about having 2 medical practitioners being an important part of the deal, because somehow or other is going to produce protection in the law. We've got such evidence from what happened in the abortion laws when people said, all these extreme cases 30 years ago, we're going to have 2 practitioners, you've got to do this, you've got to sign this, you've got to sign that. I mean, cynically, one can't help but thinking your organisation might feel, really, if you could do without the medical profession in some way, that would be great. But at the moment, it's kind of a PR flavour to it, to say that, well, actually, we're going to go and talk to those nice doctors, and somehow the nice doctors are going to protect society. I think that's a lot of nonsense. I don't think it's nonsense.
Would you like a response to that from the panel?
Yes, very likely.
Well, I did mention, didn't I, I talk about my opinion of the requirement for 2 doctors, or any safe house for that matter. I think there are many reasons to consider why we can't really make euthanasia safe. In jumping back from that to the earlier question about prescription drugs, etc., it is connected. It's interesting in Oregon that there are really no safeguards as such, in as much as, yes, the doctor may go through a process before signing a prescription giving the patient the drugs to take home, and yes, they may sit in their cupboard for ages. But all the law requires, essentially, is that that person ingests that drug themselves. Now, whether that was forced later on or what, we just don't know. There are no protocols around the point of death. Further to that, in Oregon, and I think this is quite understandable, so it's just an observation. The Choices and Compassion Group actually has a list of doctors available who will help you. In Washington State, you can download instructions, helpful instructions, and one of them says, look, if you really want to kill yourself, when you go to your doctor and talk about it, don't be put off if they say, oh, can we talk about that later? Now, to my way of thinking, a wise doctor who's been approached by someone who said, look, doc, I want to kill myself, wants to deal with that in a calm way. So maybe even saying, look, can we just talk about something else for a moment and come back later? It might be a good approach, but these people in Washington are actually saying, well, don't be put off by that. And if you don't get the right answer from your doctor, basically ring this number and we'll provide a doctor for you. Well, you know, again, I ask, how is that providing safeguards? I'm not suggesting for a moment that there isn't a second doctor who is objective and proper and does the right thing, but, you know, the point of it is, if you're providing a service, you want people who are going to comply and provide that service. You know, that's just a simple fact of life.
Question here at the front.
This is a legal thing. Oh, sorry. I think this is a question for Grant, more of a legal nature. And listening to the debate tonight, we've heard that the reason to change the law is to, in some ways, alleviate suffering of those who can't have their suffering alleviated. We've also heard that if the law is changed, it is going to introduce, or there's a risk of suffering for those who are vulnerable. And it seems as if the options being presented are either the status quo or a change in the law. One of the other concerns that has come through has been about the way in which those people who find themselves in a position, for whatever reason, out of empathy, out of compassion, perhaps out of extreme exhaustion, or whatever, helping a family member to die. I wonder whether there's a third option there somewhere, and that is that the law essentially stays the same, but that we look at how the law can in fact exercise greater compassion to those people without the rigours and the publicity and pain of a trial, while also still acting as a deterrent. My sense is that in some of the cases the judiciary have passed where they've tried to take account of the person's motivation, perhaps their lack of freedom or coercion, in assisting or abetting the suicide, the public perception of that has been that the law really doesn't believe in the law anyway. There's a distinction there for me. I wonder whether you might comment on that third option, if it is in fact a third option.
I mean, the technical legal position is that the law is as I outlined, the judges need to follow that law, but to the extent that there is a third option, I think we've seen the New Zealand judiciary trying to explore that option over the last 15 years, and the decisions they've made, and they've done it not through the application of the law to the facts, but through the sentencing decisions they've made. Now, as you probably know, with the Sentencing Act and the discretion that a judge has, they are able to do that, and they are doing it. And I think we've seen that very clearly. At the end of the day, whether that's an acceptable option, I don't know. The danger is that it's sending mixed messages. It's saying we've got the law, it says this, it says that voluntary euthanasia is illegal, but we're going to give the judges just a bit of an ability to dampen down that law, and okay, it's not really going to be one way or the other. If law is there to guide society and to make society's expectations, or to make the expectations clear to society, I think ideally, from a legal point of view, the law has to be clear. I personally wouldn't want to see a third option left in the hands of an unelected judiciary. I mean, it's not that I don't trust the judiciary to exercise their discretion in an intelligent way. It's just I don't think they're the people who should be making the decision. Whatever way this country decides to go, I think the decision has to be made clearly by the elected lawmakers in Parliament.
In the UK, where a lot of people were taking the option of going to Switzerland, where they can access the death with dignity process there, but many of them are in such a state that to be able to get to Switzerland they have to have their relative or friend to take them. And the Attorney General in the UK has drawn up a set of guidelines where he says that in the following cases, friends or relations who assist somebody to take their life should not be charged, and he has drawn up a set of guidelines. I personally think that any situation which requires a family member to kill a family member, call it, I mean, I use the word kill, I mean to assist their family member to die because this is what they are asking for. To ask a family member to have to do that is an appalling indictment of society.
Well, we've got 5 minutes or so left. Yes, Kristen.
Thank you again to all the speakers. Jan, in your talk you said there was no slippery slope, and I think the speakers that followed provided their view of evidence that disagree with that. Two things I would ask about. The last legislation had described terms of end-of-life illness or incurable illness. And the latter is a very vaguely defined term, which strikes me as extremely open to extrapolation and extension of the slippery slope. I'd be interested in the opinion of any of the speakers on that. And Janet, your own opinion would be appreciated on whether you think euthanasia should be offered to those who cannot give consent, such as those quoted, those who are not capable of doing so, whether through dementia or the like. Do you support euthanasia choices for them?
We'll start with that, Janet.
My short answer to that is no. If the patient cannot, has not the cognitive ability to say that they wish this to happen, then my understanding of the current bill and any bill anywhere else is that they are not. I mean, in Holland, no patient has the right to euthanasia. They have to be able to persuade their own physician. It has to be their own GP to start off with, and then a second physician. So there is no right to euthanasia. And I think the same would apply here. This is why I urge absolutely everybody in this room to make sure that you all have what is called an advance directive, which makes sure that you say that when you go to hospital you do not want certain things to happen. Unfortunately, under the current law, you can't say, I want to be medically assisted to die. You might be able to later on if the bill gets through. But you can say that you do not wish to have, and as our lawyer pointed out, under the Human Rights Act and under the Health and Disability Code of Rights, clause number 7, everybody has the right to refuse any form of medical treatment. One of the things which Terry Pratchett said, which was quite hilarious, never believe a doctor who says that you can be discharged, you cannot be discharged from hospital because of what is wrong with you. You can walk out of hospital at any time you like with help if you need it. You cannot be forcibly kept in hospital unless you've been sectioned under the Mental Health Act.
Question there? Oh, I was referring to the gentleman back. I will come back to you if you have time.
I was wondering about the drug that would end the life for a person wanting euthanasia, because the main conclusion here is a peaceful death. From what I know, there's some drugs which you give, for example, morphine, really like give you it might cause vomiting and it might give you suffering before you die. There are some medicines which are there, it could stop your breathing center. So like stop your breathing before you die. And it usually ends up in a struggle before they die. I was wondering if the drug would really give them a peaceful end, as they say that they want, or would there be a struggle? I'm just wondering about the effects of the drugs, how you give a peaceful end of life.
Is that what your hand? Are these drugs give people a peaceful life? I'm sorry?
She doesn't admit euthanasia, so she doesn't.
No, I agree that morphine can be a very unpleasant way to die. With an excess of morphine, people get hallucinations and nausea and so on. I haven't administered euthanasia, so I can't tell whether it's peaceful or not.
Right. So, Janet, where you go?
Sorry. Might as well just say it. My understanding from talking to, particularly to Jan Bernheim from Belgium, and other people who have been involved in this, is that 2 drugs are used. One is a deep sedative to start off with, and then a drug which stops muscular and motor activity. And it is a peaceful death. It's not a struggling one. And I'd just like, since we're getting close to the end, just to add one word that I don't know whether any of you came to Professor Jan Bernheim's lecture that he gave. Professor Jan Bernheim is an emeritus professor of oncology in Belgium, and was out here 2 years ago, and I've been in touch with him, and he's obviously a staunch believer in medically assisted dying. And there was a comment earlier on about the situation with the medical profession and carers and their concern about how it would feel. And Jan has this wonderful statement: "Let me reassure doctors and healthcare providers, it is nothing like giving an abortion. It is like being present and assisting at a birth."
It's 8:30. I'm happy to keep going for 2 minutes if that's the feeling of the room. Is that all right?
I have one more question.
No, we'll hold for a moment.
Just one thing occurs to me. If you're given 2 drugs and one of them paralyses the muscles in the breathing, yes, it will look like a peaceful death because you can't react. You're paralysed. But you may not be peaceful inside if you haven't had the right dose of the first drug. I used to do anaesthetics.
Okay.
Yes,
you were there.
It was just, I understand that in the Netherlands a lot of requests for euthanasia actually get tuned down because it's 2 doctors that have to decide, and if they don't feel that the right procedure is followed, they tune the request down. So that is how it goes, not the other way around.
Are you responding to something Paul
Yeah,
said?
yeah, because of the...
Do you want to respond to that again, Paul? Or?
I would hope that some are refused, but that doesn't necessarily mean that there's what I said is wrong. I mean, people should refuse. Oh, sorry.
Forget about it.
All right, but you've made the point. You've explained it. Yeah. Okay, any questions? This gentleman here.
A question for Janet. Janet, if euthanasia is okay...
Sorry,
if euthanasia is okay, why wouldn't you write a family member to administer it?
You heard the question?
No, what's it?
If euthanasia is okay, what's your objection to a family member administering it?
I can't really talk on one of the things that Sean said, is that even if you believe that your dear one, the time has come for them to go because of what they are suffering, for you to actually make that action is, I suppose it's against human nature because you nurture your family and your friends, but you also accept the fact that, I mean, this is what I said in that thing in Oregon, that the woman's family and fiancé accepted that her need to go was greater than their need to keep her. But their need to keep her could easily have been a situation where actually having to administer the drug. I think it's something, if you think about it very carefully, and it was your relative, you would much rather it was done carefully, professionally, by somebody who knew what it was doing, rather than you doing it yourself. Oh, just a comment on Holland. In 2010, 136,058 people died in the Netherlands, which has a population of over 16.5 million. In that year, there were 3,136 reported cases of euthanasia. That's 2.3% of the deaths. It's not all that high.
Janet's statistics are quite correct. I would argue that one person dying who didn't want to, one person abused by the law is far too many. There are far more than that. It's clearly creating, in my opinion, something of a culture change in that country. I'm not sure if it's entire. As the lady said, doctors do refuse to euthanize.
No. Yeah, if the criteria are not met.
Yeah, but like you're saying, some will refuse for personal ethical reasons, and that's all. That's what I'm saying is I'm not sure to the extent of it, but it certainly the figures suggest to me that there has been some kind of culture change in the Netherlands for the law to be extended the way it has.
We've had for 10 years.
Yeah. Paul, while you're there, can I just ask a quick question? Listening to your presentation, I got the feeling that you're not so much opposed to euthanasia in principle, you're opposed to it because we can't make it work properly, we can't make it work well. Do you make that distinction or not?
I would say there is a principle. Yes, I would say there is a principle. I mean, if you're looking at it, and I have done for many years now, I've been sort of fighting on these bills in Australia for the better part of 15 years. And can you believe it, 5 bills in the current Parliament in South Australia at the moment of this kind of nature. I'm absolutely convinced that they can't be made safe. I'm absolutely convinced that it does damage to society and puts vulnerable people at risk. And so therefore, my principle is that I guess I see it as a social justice issue. I think it's appropriate to stand up for the people who I think would be at most risk of being damaged by this legislation. And so that is a principle, yes.
Okay. It seems to me that both sides of the debate are trying to look after the same people, which is interesting. Let's do 2 more questions, okay? You have one, can I go to someone else? Yes, the lady there.
Hi, this is a question I aimed to ask Paul. From a PI, from the PI community here in New Zealand, sort of a PI perspective, over the years we have seen like the cost of, like, there are terminal diseases that can undergo some sort of, well, okay, the PI community, there are many people that have the opportunity to undergo surgery or chemotherapy to improve their health. But in terms of many people here in the PI community, the costs are rising, and I've seen like a majority of people have to go back home and wait for death to come to them. That is like a painful wait. So, you know, I'm looking at this as like, it's a burden for them and for their families. So don't you think that this burden should be justified if they want to be euthanized?
So the Pacific Island community is what she means by PI, you know,
I'm not quite sure where you're going. I would have thought, and I don't know your medical system that well, but I would have thought there was some sort of universal cover for that kind of treatment. So I'm not sure why you're saying that you sort of have to go back home and not have that kind of treatment. Would you mind enlarging on that, or somebody please explain to me, because I'm not sure what.
So what makes the PI community different in this respect?
Well, I guess maybe not like the PI community, more like socioeconomic classes, like who find it hard, like the costs of improving their lives, and I feel that to be euthanized would lessen the burden. And it's not even. That's how you can answer the question.
So you don't really have a question, you're simply saying.
Well, I'd like to ask, like, you know, don't you think that that's a burden that can be justified?
So you're saying euthanasia should be justified in situations where someone economically hasn't got access to good care. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. That's it there. Does anybody want to comment on that one?
Sorry.
You have to respond to that?
Yes, I'm just talking to Grant, you confirmed you do have a public health system. If there is some inequity in the way your people or any person that have been treated in your system, that needs to be addressed. There's no question about that. That's a social inequity that must be stopped. I can't see why any person either in New Zealand or in Australia cannot have access to the support and the treatments that they need or they want on equal basis with every other person. So I don't see that distinction. I know in other places where healthcare is run differently, that may be an issue, but I don't believe it's an issue here.
We'll take one more question, everybody. Who's it? This gentleman here. You can have one here. Where do you go? The microphone.
This will be for Anne, but if anyone wishes to. It was mentioned earlier on that perhaps some other trained person could assist in the death, and I thought that, I don't think I'd really like to be that person or in that profession, but just an aside. And so then if we legally have doctors to do that, and even feel perhaps pressure to do it, would that result in a cultural change amongst the medical profession itself? Do you think?
I think it would have to be speculation, but yes, I think it possibly could lead to that. I certainly, I think Paul was referring to it, but I think it's Oregon. There are a small number of doctors who do the vast majority of assisted suicides. I don't have the numbers to hand, but yes, I would be very worried. It's much easier just giving an injection than having to work out how to do a complicated thing and how to. I'm not going to be very clear on it. Yeah, I think there is a very real risk of a culture change, yes.
Right.
Can I just give a...
Yes, we won't. Yep.
Oh, you've got I just wanted to say that, again, respect for the medical profession, because this is something which is often said that if voluntary euthanasia comes in, respect for the medical profession is bound to go because doctors are actually going to be involved in killing you rather than caring for you. According to the European Values Survey of the confidence of Belgians in their healthcare system, it rose from 87% in 1999 to 92% in 2008, the highest in Europe. And trust in doctors in the Netherlands has risen from 57% in 2002 to 79% in 2011. Those are two countries which have legally assisted, medically assisted dying. And just to correct one thing, and sorry Paul, which you said about being able to dial up in Holland to get your euthanasia. The only way that happens is because you are at home, your own doctor is not prepared to give you the lethal drug, and it is that doctor's perfect right to say they do not wish to. And so there is now a system whereby a travelling team, euthanasia team if you like, it's been called, it's just been like in Germany. It is nothing like that. Because a patient at home who has been cared for at home now has reached the end and wishes to take advantage of the legal reason for going. Their doctor will not allow them. They can access the legal ability a different way.
Okay, you want to respond once more, Paul? So really, and with due reference to Grant, Australian specialists on these issues, Margaret Somerville once positively thought that doctors are probably no more trained in killing than anyone else, and that perhaps that it should be lawyers that do it because at least they understand the law.